Hey guys, it's Gail with Everything Nash here with Matthew West. Matthew, we've never talked before, which is weird because we've both been in town a really long time.
Yes, well, I'm glad our paths are crossing today.
Same. We were just talking about Lifest. So while we were talking about that, tell me what Lifest is and why you want to do this event.
Yeah, well, Lifest is a great Christian music festival that actually takes place every year in Wisconsin, and I've performed there for several years now, and thousands of people show up. It's an epic experience, and for the first time, Lifest has actually decided to do a Tennessee version of that festival, and so they reached out and invited me to headline one of the nights, and I'm super pumped. It's a 3-day festival, Christian music festival, with some of your favorite artists and me. So even if I'm not your favorite, I'm there. But it's just going to be a great 3 days of music and food, all the things.
And a really great lineup, by the way. And you're really passionate about this. I was surprised when you were talking earlier just how excited you are about this event because you get to play all over.
Yeah, I think all the artists wish we had more chances to play in our home state because most of us live in Tennessee, and country music seems to always have great experiences for the artists to play in Nashville, and it becomes a real destination spot for country music, obviously. But I really feel like, just as much as Music City has country music in its roots, it definitely has Christian music here as well. It's the epicenter of the Christian music community. So to have a chance to put on a big festival in Tennessee is just a real treat. And I think it's going to be awesome.
So speaking of Christian music, you're also hosting the K-Love Awards this weekend where you're nominated also. Do you get nervous when you have to host as opposed to singing?
I do get a little bit nervous. I'm very comfortable doing it at this point. I've hosted the K-Love Awards, I think 6 times. I think I'm more confident playing a song because I've put my 10,000 hours in doing that. But telling a joke and hoping it lands, at least Saturday Night Live gets a dress rehearsal and then they throw out the stuff that's not funny. I don't have that safety net. So I've got to deliver and bring my A game, whether I'm hosting or performing, but it is fun. I mean, I've attended award shows in the past, and, sometimes the difference between an entertaining show and a boring one is who's talking between the songs. And so I definitely feel a lot of pressure to make sure that the show moves along and that people have a fun time for sure.
Do these awards, when you win awards, what do they mean to you? Do they mean something or do they not mean a whole lot to you?
Oh, it means everything. It's all about the awards. It doesn't matter. Nothing else matters except for recognition and fame. And no, I'm saying that sarcastically because I think after a year like what we've been through, I think awards matter less than they ever have. And I don't mean to make light of an awards show. It's all fun and well and good, but this past year, I had 2 #1 songs that went #1 in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm gonna tell you right now, you wanna have a wake up call in your life is to see an entire world in turmoil, and your your kids can't go to school, and you can't provide, you can't go play your shows, and meanwhile you're having this career highlight. And it kind of puts everything in perspective to go, you know what? I don't know that it matters if I have a #1 song or not. What matters is can my music impact somebody's life and help them find hope during what might be a hopeless season for a lot of people. And so I think it's been really cool to kind of come back to home base in that and just be reminded. And I think really, at our core, all of the artists in Christian music, we got into this in the beginning, not even thinking about an award. If we were thinking about awards, we would have probably pursued another genre. But so I don't know. I guess I just think my perspective has continued to grow, and but I will say, obviously, it's always fun, to honor artists and writers who've written and performed great music that's encouraged people. it's a fun night of celebration. And I always feel like when we're handing awards out, what we're really doing is we're celebrating like what God has done. You know, we're celebrating like some really cool things in that sense. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
So speaking of songs released during the pandemic, truth be told, Matthew, that's a really, really powerful song. Give me the story behind it. What inspired you to write that song?
Well, it's a song about honesty and authenticity and how hard that is to find in our world today. But what inspired me to write it is how hard it is to find in my own life sometimes. And, that song's kind of like my autobiography in 3 minutes. It's a story of a kid who grew up, his dad was a preacher. And so he grew up in church and from a very young age learned how to like put on a show, put on a face and smile for the church, smile for everybody, and make sure that they knew that the preacher's kid was all right, or as the song says, I'm fine. And then I grow up and I become a public figure, and I sing and I write books and I have a podcast and my voice is heard by a lot of people. And there's a tendency once again to pretend, even if you're struggling, because it's not easy for anybody, let alone having a public platform, to admit when you're struggling in any area of your life. And so that really brings about kind of this nagging feeling in your life that you're living something less than an authentic version of who you are. And I just wrote that song as kind of a way of breaking free from that, and just going like, what if I've gotten it wrong? What if the world doesn't want to see the polished version of my story, but instead the actual version of my story that by no means has all the right answers at all the right times, and so I wrote the song in the hopes that it might set somebody else free to admit, hey man, I'm going through something and I'm tired of hiding it, or I'm battling with some anxiety or depression, or I'm whatever it might be, and the coolest things have happened as a result of that song coming out. Somebody saying, hey, I've got a drug problem and I really need to get some help, or hey, my marriage is in trouble and we're going to start going to counseling. And, that's the good stuff. I've discovered that life gets good when you stop trying to pretend that it's good all the time.
But that's as a Christian leader, if you will, that's a very vulnerable place for you to put yourself in.
That's exactly right. And that's where I think I'm just at that point in my life where I'm like, I have to be willing to go there. I think as a songwriter and as an artist too, like it's this weird mix of like, you need to perform, but your best material is going to be found at your most vulnerable. So how do you balance those two things? You know what I mean? And I don't know. I just think I've written a lot of songs. I've put in my 10,000 hours, and I've had tons of songs on the radio over the years, and nothing has resonated more with audiences than when I'm at my most vulnerable as a writer. And I'm trying to lean into that, not just in music, but in my life. I'm trying to find the lesson from that and how I should live my life, and going, all right, how can I live a vulnerable life and not feel weak in that, And that's the difference too. Like when your faith is real, when you have a faith in God too, like you start to realize that the opposite things are true than what the world might think, And so a lot of times the world might say to be vulnerable is to be weak. But I think the message in that song, Truth Be Told, and really what I've been learning in my life is that being vulnerable is actually a sign of strength and wisdom and authenticity. And those are three things that I want to reach in my life. And I want my kids to be able to say, hey, dad wasn't always perfect, but he was vulnerable enough to apologize when he was wrong, or he was authentic enough to admit when he was struggling with something. And he didn't always, sit on his high horse pretending he knew everything and had it all together. I don't want to be that way, So we're all works in progress, and I feel like my music is kind of evidence of where I'm at in my in my work.
I love it. It reminds me of the verse, when I'm weak, then I'm strong.
That's it. You know, I mean,
Oh,
that's the business of opposites. I mean, when you like open the Bible, it's crazy how opposite it is from what the world makes us think we need to be and how we need to act. And so I like that. I like the opposites. I like that idea of like, you know, being authentically flawed. You know,
ooh.
in my book's called, I wrote a book called Hello, My Name Is. And in the book, I tell the story of a guy who bought his wife what she thought were 2-carat diamond earrings. And what he didn't tell her was that they were actually made from the less expensive imposter cubic zirconia. And that, so for years, she was so proud of her earrings, and she took them around, showed them to her friends, and she thought she had this like priceless, you know, crazy expensive earrings. And then they were moving houses, and they had insurance company had told them they need to get an appraisal on all of their, you know, belongings, their expensive jewelry. And it was only then, years later, after wearing what she thought were the real thing, she found out that he had gone for the cheap option, and those weren't real after all. And that story always stuck with me, because I just thought, like, that's the difference. Those are the two paths we can choose in our lives. Like, we could be the cubic zirconia version of ourselves and use the right filters on Instagram and only show the highlight reels, or we could be the diamond version of ourselves. Well, some would say, well, diamonds sound good. I don't want to be a diamond. Well, guess what every diamond has in common? Flaws. Every single diamond has a flaw, even a diamond. And I love that. I love that concept, because researchers have said that finding a diamond with no flaws is like finding a unicorn. In other words, it doesn't exist. And so I think maybe that's the mission I'm on with my music, is to encourage myself and other people to discover the diamond that you are, and to not believe the lie that you're somehow less than or worth less because you have some flaws, because every diamond has flaws. But to settle for a cubic zirconia life is to reach the end and have yourself miss the boat, you know, miss what it was all about.
That would totally preach, my friend.
Yeah.
New music, what's happening with you? I know you released your album in 2020. What is new music look like for Matthew West?
Well, I've actually started like writing these funny, like stupid songs, and I know it's like, it's so weird, but like people seem to really like them. And so
The Thanksgiving song.
yeah, and I
My
did one
kids
called,
love that song.
yeah, and I did one called Quarantine Life over during the pandemic, and so I got a new funny song coming out Father's Day weekend about dads trying to make sure their daughters dress appropriately, and so that's coming out, and I'm working on a new record right now, and I'm making a Christmas album. And so lots of good stuff happening. I also get to write a lot of songs with other artists. And so I've got some songs hitting the radio this year that I'm super pumped about. I'm not the singer of them, but I'm just as excited. So there's a new artist named Ann Wilson whose song just came out, and it's doing great on the radio. And I've got a song with Casting Crowns that's coming out in June, and a song with an artist named Micah Tyler coming out to radio, I think in June as well. So that's fun. Just a lot of like chances to be creative. And that gets me excited to wake up every morning.
Last question, Matthew. What's your message for people who are struggling right now as a man of faith? What would you say to people?
Well, my message would be that if this past year has taught us anything, hopefully there's a message here that we can all listen to, and that is, though we may try, we cannot make it through this life on our own strength. And I feel like this past year has brought me back home to that reminder that I could scratch and claw my way and try to survive during the hard times, but I'm going to reach the end of my strength. My strength has limits. And when that happens, you can do one of two things. You can keep searching within and try to muster up the strength to put on your face, put on your show, and make life go the way you think it should. Or you could dare to believe that there's a strength greater than your own. And my prayer for anybody out there would be that they would choose to tap into the promise of a strength that never runs out. And that comes from a God who made you, a God who loves you, a God who's not surprised by the difficult times that you go through, and a God who promises to give you his strength when all your strength is gone. And so there again is the message of opposites that you find in the Bible, is that, hey, when you run out of strength, that's not a sign of weakness. Stepping out and reaching out for a strength greater than your own, that's really where you discover a strength that's strong enough to bring you through the hard times like 2020 and 2021.